welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I know this is going to be a great episode because our guest, Mary Kay Delvo, and I had some wackadoo tech problems before we came on air, and she's calm and cool and collected and not at all fritzed out. And so this is the type of leader that we want when we're talking about boards, isn't it, Mary Kay?
Yeah, you can't get freaked out by technology or you'll never make it. There's never been a board meeting without a tech issue.
Exactly. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And, you mentioned to me when we first started chatting, nobody grows up wanting to be a board member. And so we have to think about what this looks like and how we pursue this whole issue. So I am super excited to be talking with Mary Kay Delvo today on the Nonprofit Show. We are here because we have amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. And more importantly, I have just published a book with the amazing Tony Bell, who's also one of our intrepid co-hosts. And it's called The Architecture of Fundraising. It gets into how to become a professional fundraiser, even if you're coming to it from the community side. It's really an amalgamation of decades of work that both of us have given to the sector. And so we invite you to join us with that. Mary Kay Delvo, strategist, coach, and facilitator of Inspiring Sight. Hey, Mary Kay, where are you coming to us? What part of the country are you coming to us from?
I'm in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area of Minnesota.
Awesome.
Twin Cities.
Awesome. Talk to us about how you came to this journey of being where you are and working with boards and working with this huge issue.
Yeah, just like we talked about, nobody dreams of growing up to be a board member. I didn't dream of growing up to be a consultant to boards either. But along my way, I was a social worker. I worked with a lot of boards. I worked in nonprofits for 30 years. And about a decade ago, I decided to start my own company to help address some of the issues. And I thought I could do it better from the outside the organization than I could from in. And I saw these gaps across organizations, and they always led, it would be challenges within the organization, but they would always lead back to board governance. Yeah. And so as I dug into that and started doing strategic planning with organizations, because it's the board's responsibility to set the strategic plan, I was dealing with boards more and more and more. And that just sort of filtered its way into board development and developing some expertise in that area, or at least more knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I love your comments, and I hear this a lot about the shock of how you can have an issue or a problem or a concern or an opportunity. Absolutely. And then when you start working on it, it all kind of filters back to the board. And a lot of times that's a shock to folks because they'll think, oh no, this is a programs issue, or this is a, fund development issue or leadership or whatever. And so I'm really thrilled to have your perspective on this. So let's dig in and start with the concept that board service is learned and not dreamed. I mean, I just think this is a fabulous way to start this conversation. What do you mean by
boards get a bad rap a lot of times and rightly so. Executive leadership and staff can be very frustrated with boards.
Yeah.
But I don't hear people talking about why they need training. If they knew better, they'd do better. But many of them they don't know what they're getting into. There's no other, unless they've already experienced board service, there's no other place in their growing up, in their schooling, that really talks about governance, that really helps people learn how to do it and why it matters for nonprofits. It's their job to protect and direct. And so I think we're missing an opportunity to really engage board members by giving them the right start.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's riveting that you said that, because when I first joined a nonprofit board, I realized that, and this is just horrifying, I realized that I was drawing upon what I had learned in student council government from Scottsdale High decades before, right? I mean, that was my training. And then I can remember thinking, okay, we got a problem here, because hello, although I did learn some good skills and stuff like that, but that was it. And then I was expected to go in and be a leader of a multi-million-dollar organization, fraught with issues, right? And so I love that you said that about this approach of training, and it's different than onboarding. It is different than onboarding. You've got to understand some of these lessons. Fascinating. I think that it's kind of one of those things that you don't realize what's going on until you're sitting in the seat.
Absolutely. That's so true.
Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit more in depth. Shifting from obligation to ownership. What do you mean by that? Because I feel like that governance piece is a pretty heavy concept, but where do you see this playing out?
Well, this really plays out with how we bring board members on. I mean, if I had $1 for every time, people say, oh, just join the board, you'll be great. It's just 1 hour a month. Or, and they really don't tell them what it's about. And then board members get in there, and many boards don't run themselves. They expect the executive director to do everything that makes the board run. And that is not the executive director's role. The board is responsible for being self-sufficient. So when I say from obligation, like, okay, you told me I have to do these 5 things, I'll do those, to ownership, the ownership is the board is responsible for self-governing. That's not extra work to be put on the executive director. They're to be doing that in partnership with the because the executive director's running the organization day to day.
Right.
So that's what I mean about that ownership versus like, okay, I'm doing what I was asked.
Right. Let me ask you this. Do you think that executive directors or CEOs of nonprofits understand this?
I think many would be so relieved if the boards would start managing themselves. Where I see it being resisted is executive directors who have been there a long time and are used, like the board's just not in their way and they let them just do their work. And it's somewhere in between. It is the board's job to ask questions and to, make sure that things pass the smell test. It is not their job to micromanage. And when I say boards need to run themselves, I am not talking about them micromanaging the staff. I'm talking about them being responsible for their own succession, for evaluating themselves to ensure they are governing at the highest levels, about looking out ahead and having discussions around foresight about what's coming, so that we don't get knocked off our feet if and when something happens. I mean, the pace of disruption and change, that is just day-to-day business now. That is not something you do once in a while. And for boards who aren't owning that themselves, and they're only doing that if the executive director says you need to do this, it has to come from the board. It's their job.
It's interesting that you would say this, because I absolutely agree with you on this. And I'm kind of thinking that nobody really understands this. Nobody really discusses this. And how many boards, not even, not that they wouldn't willingly do this. I don't feel like they understand the concept, that they expect the leadership to come from the C-suite. And yet that's one of the guardrails, is that we should have autonomy, right?
I'm glad you said that. That is why you have a board. That's why it's required for nonprofits. So you have people looking at it from different angles who aren't in the day to day, and they're asking different questions. And I was listening to your show from yesterday, Julia, and oh my gosh, there were so many connections to the board when you were talking about finance teams and who else should be asking these questions. And it's like, these are the strategic questions and the governance questions boards should be asking about that finance. The long-term strategy. How do we know we're being efficient? Where are there places we could be saving money to put in another place because we're being inefficient in one area but not in another? And so it all comes back to that.
It's like what you said at the top of the show, and that is all roads lead to the board, basically, right? And yet we just don't think of it that way, right? So I want to get into something that you've created, and I'm really excited to learn about this. You've developed something called the seasonal board cycle. Talk to us about what this is and how we might look at our own organizations and filter this concept through what we're doing.
Yeah, I think in pictures, and I do a lot of facilitating in metaphors, and pictures seem to help people grasp concepts better. So because this, I've been trying to move this forward in organizations and I keep hitting roadblocks. So the seasonal board cycle is based, if you take the metaphor of the 4 seasons. I'm from Minnesota, so we have 4 seasons.
Lucky you.
And it doesn't have to follow the exact season you're in, but boards have seasons. And so if you look at spring is about planting and cultivating. That's where you're doing your cultivating of new board members. Who do we need to hear from? What perspectives do we need at the table? So it's about that being intentional and purposeful. And then summer is about effective engagement. So now they're here. How are we going to keep them engaged and use the best that they are bringing us? How are we going to make sure that we're doing division of labor, which happens throughout committee work? We tend to put everything on the executive team. And if you spread the work out across, because boards are constantly in motion because they're terms and they're volunteer. So then you spread the knowledge across your whole board instead of it lying with 1 or 2 at the leadership helm. And then you have fall, which is where you intentionally revitalize your board. And this is where you harvest impact. One thing I don't hear nonprofits talk about, or especially boards have to ensure they're bringing this to staff, or it won't happen in many cases, is that how do we know what we're doing is working? Where are we looking to know we're having impact, and not just measuring how many people showed up at the conference? That doesn't tell you anything, but that's the board's strategic governance lens to be asking about that. And then we have winter, which is about, in Minnesota, we recharge during the winter, and then we look ahead to what do we need to be paying attention for that isn't here, but there's potential for it to affect us. And so this is where you re-up your strategies, you refine them, you celebrate. Nonprofits don't celebrate enough at the board level or the organization level, and they deserve to. And without that, you undermine the enthusiasm and the reward for all the work that's done. So this cycle is a cycle. It's cyclical. It doesn't stop. It's not linear. Some days we have winter on Wednesday and we have spring on Thursday. So it just keeps moving. And that if when boards use that as a grounding place, they will begin to, over time, train themselves to see the connections between all parts of the organization and their role in that organization.
It almost seems, Mary Kay, that if you understand there is a cycle and a trajectory of change, then it's going to absolve you of a lot of frustration. I did a board training on just this past Saturday, and during the breaks, I had people that came up to me and that were like complaining about other boards they were on, and they were like, "This board's crap," blah blah, and I was like taken aback at how negative
Mm-hmm.
um, their other board experiences were. And I've been holding that in my heart and thinking about it, because these are attitudes that are really hard to overcome. Like
Yes.
if you have a bad sense of that the board's not working, it's like your only option seems to leave. But what I love about your idea is that it kind of gives us permission to say, yeah, this is a roller coaster. And like what you said, you can be in one season on Tuesday and the next on Thursday. And so I really love this approach, because it allows people to deal with change and hopefully reduce their stress. Does that make sense?
Yes, I that's my intention, is to help make this a little more easy for people to incorporate and grasp, and
Yeah.
they can have fun with that too, and the one thing that I see with boards is this idea that we checked off the list and it's done, and
Right.
it's never done. And with all the training on what a board's role is, here's a couple of I tell people, if you take nothing else out of my training, remember this when it comes to what is your role as a board member. It is your role to protect and direct the organization. So anything that comes up, you can ask the simple question, how is it this decision is protecting the organization and or directing the organization? And if you can't link it, if you can't make an alignment there, then you need more discussion. Maybe that's not the right decision. You keep that going until you find that alignment. The other thing is, I always say, noses in, fingers off. And what I mean by that is, it's not your job to manage. So if you're starting to do for the organization, you're not governing, you're micromanaging. Noses in is, does it pass the smell test? Bring your curiosity to the board table. If something doesn't sound right, ask some questions like, this isn't making sense to me. Help me understand it better. Or, where can you show me that this links to that? But those are two very simple. If you remember that, you will start to use more strategic questions along with the seasonal board cycle.
Yeah, I love that approach. And that just to me illustrates the issue of governance, and to govern, and as a fiduciary in your role as a board member. I love that approach. And I think that could help people understand more fully what the role is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. I just love this. I'm absolutely fascinated that you've had these observations and you've been able to articulate them and put them together. Let's dig down into the strategic aspect, because so many boards get caught up on strategy, the strategic, planning session, the strategic plan, and they very often hate the process, don't really work the plan, and then at the end of the year or term, when they're measuring it, they're like, "Well, see, it failed. Why do we do this?" It's just such an interesting process, and I would love to spend our remaining time getting your opinions about this so that we could be more successful when we talk about strategic planning.
Yeah, this is the other area, and everything you said, it's like you've been walking around with me in my work, because it happens. And so I've adapted my processes to try to avoid those things happening, and to try to set the organization up so their mindset is different around these. I no longer call it strategic planning. There's a lot of there's a lot of baggage with the word strategic planning because it hasn't always, the process hasn't always been good or utilized or connected to the work. And I call it a strategic map. And the reason I call it a map is because it's really a journey to a destination. So your vision is where you want to end up, where you think you can get to. But along the way, if I know I want to get to Washington, D.C., there's many routes I can take to get there. That's still my destination, but I'm going to run into road construction. I might run into bad weather. There might be a road out because of flooding. My car might break down. I mean, there's a million things that could happen in between. So strategic planning is the approach to strategic planning is the same kind of mindset. Like your vision is, this is where we're headed. And then you can even bring that back year to year as you set your priorities for the year. This is where we want to be at the end of the year so that we can get to Washington, D.C. by November. But then you have to be constantly visiting that journey to say, are we still on track, or did we take a little detour, and did the detour help us or hurt us? Maybe it actually got us there quicker and we hadn't seen that coming, because the world around your plan is constantly changing. And that's the only constant I can give you. The rest is your board, your staff. You need to be learning how to ask questions and evaluate. So you say, we are going off track. What will it take to get us back on track? Maybe we didn't set up maybe there's one tweak in the program that will help us get what we need. Maybe we're asking the wrong question when we're evaluating. Maybe, there's so many scenarios. It's not, the program doesn't work or it works. Maybe there's just tweaks you can make. And maybe it's completely the wrong thing because you're gambling. You're taking a guess on what you think will work. Right. And sometimes you're exactly right. And sometimes you're not, because especially in nonprofits, much of, especially in the human service sector, you're dealing with people. There's nothing predictable about people, except they're unpredictable. And so, how can you have this linear plan when the factors are always changing? And so it's a new mindset. The word strategic plan, the word plan in and of itself is like finite, like here's a date, it's over, we did it, check it off. Right. That is not at all what strategy is about. It's about mapping your future and then making adaptations along the way and getting smarter because you now have new information to inform you.
I love that you're putting it in that context, because I feel like that's one of the problems with strategic planning is that it's really easy to bail on it versus with mapping and framing it as a journey. It gives you permission to navigate with some different scenarios, to, make corrections. To your point, I love, you said the road trip to DC. You don't just look at the map the first time you turn on your car and then never look at it again. Right. You have to keep going back to it and refine the journey. And so that's really smart, really interesting approach. How do you advise nonprofits to measure that impact? Is it at the end of the year? Is it every month? Like, how do you feel like we should know if we've driven off the map, so to speak, or we're on?
So I developed an understanding impact map for the staff to utilize to guide their work. So after a strategic mapping session and the board has approved the map, then I spend a half day or full day with the staff. And we say, okay, I have boards also do a desired impact statement for each strategic direction.
Smart. The
desired impact lines up with the mission. So then staff take the desired impact statement and they set goals towards that. And they set what are our success indicators. It informs what do they think they'll need to do to meet that desired impact statement. And it's essentially out saying, where do we think this work is going to take us. And then where do we look for the measurement for the evidence that that's actually true? And so I work to create that plan with the staff right away for the year. And then built into that understanding impact map are regular reviews by staff, and then they report out on that to the board. So you should be reporting, every board report should be information about how you're progressing. If you're not progressing, what you understand about why not, and what recommendations about how to shift it.
Okay, so we don't have a lot of time left, and this is like my burning question of the day. And it's kind of like a chicken and egg kind of concept. And that is, sometimes we see boards make these strategic decisions and set goals when they're not in the trenches. They don't really understand programming or how the situation is with boots on the ground. How do you feel about the direction of the planning emanating from the staff and the C-suite or the team who's going to have to get this work done, and then flowing it towards the board and having them, for lack of a better word, approve it and serve as the stewards of that? Like, where do you see this give and take?
That is a great question. And I see this all the time. I will not do a strategic mapping process without the senior leadership team involved in the session with the board.
Good.
I also gather staff feedback, which I synthesize for the board. And if I'm not hearing their feedback in how the plan is developing, then I say, I don't see your staff's input in here. You're not there yet. So I make sure that input gets heard, but the senior leadership, and it depends on the size of the organization. If it's very small, I have all staff be there.
Sure.
But staff have to be involved in that because they do know the day-to-day. The reason I don't have staff push a plan up to the board for review or, approval is that it does not build buy-in by the board, which furthers this issue of it's not their responsibility, and it's one of their core governance responsibilities. Yeah. So buy-in is very important, which is why on the other end for staff, I won't do a strategic plan where there isn't staff input, and I don't see staff input in the outcome of that because the staff will not buy into it. So you need them all buying in, and that's my caution about pushing it up to the board. Is that the board won't buy in and own it, which means they won't ask strategic questions against it, which means they won't connect it to their own governance work and the role that they need to bring to make sure that plan goes through. And some of it may be their work.
Right.
So I think I just caution about buy-in. So whatever the approach, there needs to be built-in buy-in mechanisms before the plan is done.
I love it. Wow. This has been a masterclass in the journey of getting a board and the staff to understand how critical strategic mapping is and what the process can be and what it looks like. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Mary Kay Delvo, she's a strategist, a coach, a facilitator at Inspiring Sight. And you can learn more about Mary Kay and her work at inspiringsight.com. What a fascinating approach that you have. I love the way you phrase things, Mary Kay. I love the way you structured things. I feel like somebody who hasn't participated in board work or is just beginning that journey, they can understand these concepts a lot quicker with your framework. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's the goal. I hope it works.
Yeah, I love it. I think it works. I think it can work. And so, yeah, check out, like I said, Mary Kay's work at Inspiring Sight. Super, super important. And especially if you feel like you're struggling with your board, maybe this is a way to kind of reset things as opposed to just hating the situation and trying to get rid of everybody. Understanding what you have and how you can work with it. What a fabulous conversation. And this is like, I love this topic. So thank you, Mary Kay, very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We also want to make sure that we thank our presenting sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. We are coming upon our 1400th episode, and we're now in year 6. So these are the folks, pretty much all of them have been with us since the beginning. And so we want to make sure that we say thank you and express our gratitude. Mary Kay, we end each and every episode with this message. And today I'm hearing it in a different way. It's so interesting because I get to say this every day, but it means different things. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well.